Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be looking at swappers. Now this video was sparked by somebody's complaint. Complaining that it was hard for them to wrap their heads around the swapper, which I completely understand. So I thought I'd make this video for anybody else who is either struggling to use the swappers much, if at all, but also for those who use it to some degree, but may not have thought of other particular uses that it would be helpful for. So it'll start very beginner friendly, and then we'll continue to move on into some other applications of the swapper. So without further ado, let's dive into the first example. Here we have the simple half swap. Now, the swapper here on the right is simply cutting the shape in two and swapping the west half of the shape, or in this case, the left half of the shape. Now, I always try to build in the north orientation, which you can see down there in the bottom left. And if I always build all my blueprints and everything else with north facing upwards, then it's just a lot easier to marry different designs with each other, and if you use the same orientation, it just helps significantly. So I would recommend picking an orientation and sticking with that when you build always. So we see that the swapper here is simply doing its process. I'm then rotating the right lane 180 degrees, just so we have exactly the same output here. And just for the demonstration of these, we've got trashes at the end, so it continues to flow. Obviously, you'll probably want these to go into other parts of your factory or straight into the vortex, depending on what requirements you have. So on the left-hand side, you see I've just done the same operation without using the cutters. Without using the swapper. Now I wanted to demonstrate how efficient the swapper is in comparison to other buildings. So the cutter here, first of all, we're just dumping half of each shape to begin with, so that immediately we're halving our throughput, or our end result here. We're getting 2 lanes on the right here of this swapped shape, and only 1 lane of this swapped shape, because we're dumping with the cutters. Now that's not necessary per se, but if you use these two as well, you're just going to double the build basically, and it's going to take up even more space, which is not ideal. In any case, with the cutters and without using the swappers, you're also going to have to get into the second level to use a stacker here. And the stacker will do the combining for you, of course, where there's an empty side. And I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with this process already, and it may be primarily what you're using for the beginners, but it's big, it's bulky, it takes up 2 levels, at least in this section here. So that's why the swapper process is often, or perhaps even always, ideal when it can be used. So that's about as simple as you get, but that's the first example. Let's move on to the next. So now we're looking at the quarter swap. So we're hoping to create this shape from these 2 singular shapes here. Now this can be useful for a variety of milestones and tasks. you can see here it requests a shape like that, as well as milestone 4. And even as far back as milestone 2, you've got the same thing going on. And then of course you've got some side tasks that require a checkered pattern here. So it's used quite frequently, so I definitely recommend wrapping your head around this if you can. Now we start, well, let's first look at how you can do this without swappers. So we're cutting the shape and dumping half of each lane, and then we're rotating the half shape and then cutting it again. So now we're left with the components of the shape, and then we're simply bringing them together on a stacker, splitting the lane up, rotating one side and doing the same. So we do eventually get our shape, and there's nothing wrong per se with this design. I believe that's definitely where I started when I initially played this game, and it's probably a good place to start. Just to break things down really simply and take things one step at a time. There's nothing wrong with learning that way. However, once you've got your head around how to bring together each quadrant of the shape, like so, and you've unlocked swappers, you can start making use of these. So with the swapper, we're using one to begin with, of course, and then halving the shape and mixing it. Then we're rotating each lane by 90 degrees, and then simply doing it again. And now you see we've got our shape already, and we only needed 1, 2, 3 operations. This operation, you could say that's technically 4. That's just putting the left lane into the same orientation as the right, so you can combine it, and it's the same shape going down in the same orientation. So we have 4 versus, well, quite a bit more. Look at that. And another benefit to this is this machine outputs 4 times as many shapes as this one. Now again, you could argue you don't need to dump these, and that's true, but if you use them, your machine ends up looking like this. So we're not dumping our half shapes anymore, we're bringing them across and we're doing the same operation to the right, and then you got to do it again twice. So it blows out heaps if you decide to use cutters and stackers. And yeah, you do get the same throughput, but look at the footprint. We have 4, this is, you don't need that, versus a ridiculously large machine just for the same shape. Now again, there's nothing wrong with that. This is efficiently using the shapes here. Well, I mean, we're only running at a quarter speed at the moment, because you really want this whole thing times 4, and same with this. But for demonstration purposes, we're not multiplying that. Let's just pretend these are quarter belts instead of full belts for now. In any case, you guys can clearly see the huge visual difference and the footprint difference with this design. Now, I haven't touched on this yet, but you might be wondering what all of these are. Now I'm in like Sandbox mode. I've created a new save and unlocked, I think it's called God mode or something like that, enabled cheats and all of that. So I can, when I'm designing things, you have these item producers and you can just configure them however you please, and it makes it really helpful for creating new builds, etc. And when you're playing around with your designs, I would recommend doing that. It is very helpful. So these are the steps. If you want to do something similar, instead of just designing everything in game, I always find it very helpful to visualize with different shapes and different colors what exactly is going on and which lane is going where. So I've got the basic instructions here if you want to create your own sandbox. So very important is to create a new save, because when you enable cheats, that marks your save forever, and you can no longer does it have it? No, it doesn't have achievements yet, but I'm assuming it will eventually when it comes out of early access. In any case, it marks your save game to say that you have used cheats, so definitely would not recommend doing that on your main save file. So create a new one, and then you can open your console with F1, and then from there you type cheats enable, then type God. And what I've also found very helpful when designing things is the ability to set your speed. Now if you type that in, this is the speed that I'm currently running at. I'm running at half speed, so 0.5. That's great when you're hoping to explain stuff to others, because the operations go much more slowly. But when you're troubleshooting like a big machine and it takes a while for all the inputs to come down and through, you can also speed things up like so. So if I set it to 10, you can see how fast that's going now. And you can go up to 25. But of course this isn't helpful for us. I'm going to go ahead and set that back down to half speed. Now you can see that I wasn't typing anything there. That's because I've already typed it out once. So once you do it once, you can press the up arrow in the console and it'll give you a history of what you've typed in previously. So I'm just pressing up and down at the moment. So I want to set it to 10, I can do that. Back to 0.5, I can do that as well. Anyway, let's move on from that, but that is helpful. If you guys want to design your own stuff in a new world with everything unlocked. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Oop. Another useful function of the swapper is to simply swap lanes. So obviously we don't have any swappers just yet, but I'm just demonstrating the different ways in which you can do that. So let's say we have 4 lanes here, 2 red and 2 blue, but we want to swap these 2 lanes. We want to end up with 2 red on the left and 2 blue on the right. Now of course you could use a second level, and that's pretty efficient when you just have the 4 bottom lanes here, and all of a sudden you've got them in order. Fantastic. But that quickly falls apart and you have multiple levels. So now you see this second level is being blocked by our first level going up above briefly. And of course you can work around that, but then things start to bulk out pretty quickly. So you're now left with things like this, where you need to go around the other lane, and then you're doing that again because we've got a third level in here, and all of a sudden it gets really long, just to end up with, it's not quite right, there we go, just to end up with the right orientation in each of your levels. And here's another example using launchers. Now you're still swapping and dodging other lanes, other levels that come up. No, sorry, that's a bit of a mix. But in any case, it's still quite long. And this is a little bit shorter just using launchers here. But it's still fairly significant here. Now we're getting the same result. So those are most of your options for sorting the lanes into the appropriate output down the bottom here. But you see a lot of them are quite big when you account for multiple levels. Now let's go to the swapper function. So the swapper can be used simply for swapping whole lanes, so long as it's not crystallized. So we have the same input here. Now we're starting just with swapping the half of the middle two, and then we're just rotating each of those middle two 180 degrees, so that in this lane the blue is now on the left again, and on the right lane the red is on the left again after we rotate. And then after we swap and rotate, we're just sending it through a swapper again. So swapping the west halves, and look at that, we've got ourselves the output, the desired output. And the benefit of this design, of course, is that because it doesn't use any extra levels, we are able to scale up without increasing the length of it. Now this is only longer because I'm dumping all the shapes and they need their own trash section. But you could finish here. And you get exactly what you want. And of course you don't need these middle sections here, which is why it's even smaller. Now the main downside to this design at the moment is these middle two lanes are only going at 1/4 of the speed. So that is a drawback, but it works perfectly for any lane if it's only at 25% capacity, which is likely where you'll be at if you're eventually swapping these lanes anyway and creating some sort of shape. So that's one other use for the swapper. Now let's have a look at the third. Now we're looking to do a quarter shuffle rather than a checkered shuffle. Now this is a little bit more complex, but still not too difficult. So we've got our 4 inputs of 4 different shapes, and what we want to end up with is something like this. So 1/4 of each of the different shapes here. Now I like to design my shapes in clockwise order, and that's just helpful for routing and visualizing and knowing exactly which shape is going to end up where in the output here. So what I mean by that is if I have 4 lanes, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The way I design it, or try to design it, is that this first lane is going to be in the first top right quadrant, and then the second lane is going to be in the second bottom right quadrant. The third lane will be bottom left, and then the fourth lane will be top left. That's the way I like to design it. And let's go over to our first attempts. Now of course we want each lane to end up with one part of each of these shapes, and when you're starting off with swappers, this is a little bit more on the complicated side. So if you get lost at this part, don't feel bad. Just take some time and experimentation. I've been working on these types of swappers for quite some time, and it still takes a while to figure out in multiple attempts and designed. So here's the first one, and when you're doing this for yourself, if you're not just copying and pasting someone else's design, which I wouldn't recommend to start with, It's easy just to focus on one lane at a time. So I'm thinking, okay, I obviously need some red, so I'll get that across to the second lane, and then I'll just dump it. And I forget about it. Okay, now I've got red and blue in this lane, that's good, but I need some green. So I'll transfer the red and blue that I need over to this third lane, and then I'll just dump this one. And then of course I'm doing the same thing again here, but I can't get 3 of this immediately and transfer it over to the yellow. So I swap once and then I rotate and I swap again. So this lane now has 1 yellow. So at the very least, I've now proven to myself that I'm able to get 1 of each color in 1 lane. But it is not in the orientation that I wanted. I wanted red, blue, green, yellow, and so instead I got red, green, blue, yellow. In any case, so I'm like, okay, cool, no worries, let's start again. And of course you don't need these lines here. You can condense them, of course, but when first designing your swappers, I would recommend adding those in, just so it gives you a good visual of what each of these shapes are coming into the next operation at. So now we're starting to do multiple lanes at once, swapping them like so, and again, rotating. And look, we now have all 4 lanes with each of the quadrants, but as you can see, they're all in different spaces. I mean, the first and the third are the same, and they're even in the right order: red, blue, green, yellow. But the other 2 are messed up. They go red, yellow, green, blue. So that's not right either. But we're getting there, step by step. Now, this next design, we've just iterated again. Now we're swapping the middle first and rotating before doing some extra swaps and rotations. And now we've got all 4 lanes in the right, in the same orientation. It's just a shame that it's not in the right order. So red, green, yellow, blue, that's not right. But it is shuffled equally. So that's another step in the right direction. It's still not what we want. That's the goal shape here. So we've got the same thing happen again. It's all shuffled correctly, but not in the right order. And finally, we've got our goal. Nope, that's not right either. So you see, there's quite a lot of iterations that we're going through here, but here we go. Finally, we've got the right orientation down the bottom here. Now this bottom part, I've also removed the links so that we can condense it further. And that is all you need. Now that is obviously far more compact than if you were to cut all of these individually and put it back together with stackers and things like that. That would blow out crazy. So it is definitely worth the investment to play around with swappers and rotators and see if you can come to something like this. Now, please keep in mind that took me a while to create with a lot of different iterations. So if you get stuck and finding it difficult at first, don't beat yourself out. Don't be discouraged. Maybe take a break if you like. But eventually you will get there if you stick with it. So I'll just walk you through this particular design. Of course, we're just swapping each of the two lanes first, rotating and swapping again. Now this is an important step. If you can get to here, you're doing well. So we've just checkered both of our two lanes now. And that's really important because we now have half of our shape complete. So we want red blue, and we've got red blue, and we've got red blue twice. If you rotate it, that other side is also red blue, because we're going clockwise here. And the same thing from over here, got yellow, and we wanted green and yellow, right? So we got green and yellow going clockwise, green and yellow clockwise like that. So if you're able to get that operation, you're doing well. And then just working out the rest, how to then connect those two correct orientation to the other two in the right order, swapping them around. And we've got this. Now another great thing you can do with swappers is basically the reverse. So if we have a look at this here, we're looking to convert a mixed shape back into its individual components down here. So now we have the red, blue, yellow and green shape down here, starting with a mixture. So similar design process here, I've just streamlined it. So now just rotating two of the lanes, swapping, rotating all of them. Now this one is arguably a bit easier to design because you're just thinking, okay, I want to connect all of the same colored shapes together. I hope that's all making sense. That's a bit harder to work out what's going on. Let's just take it one step at a time. So we rotate two of the four lanes and then we swap them both. And you can see what that operation does is it connects both the red and the green together on the right hand side here. And then over on the left, the red and the green on the left hand side as well. And then from there we're rotating each shape 90 degrees. And we're moving the red part over to the left and then the green part over to the right. So that now we have two full red pieces on the left two lanes and two full green pieces on the right two lanes. And then from there we simply swap again, and then all of a sudden we've got our full green shape and our full red shape. And we're left with a fairly simple operation to finish off. Got the blue and yellow all together in the middle two lanes. So we're rotating, we're swapping again finally, and there we have all four shapes complete. And this, of course, is just a condensed version here. Now that about wraps it up for the swapper uses, but I do have one bonus application, but this is fairly advanced and most useful when you start looking at make anything machines. So if that's above where you're at, you don't want to think about that, by all means just finish the video here. That's plenty swapper applications, and for those who are done, thank you very much for watching, and I hope this was helpful. Now, for those of you that want to kick on and look at how we might be able to use swappers with crystals, let's dive back in. So there's a few things to keep in mind with crystal calibration. Let's get the screen back up here. You only want to attach crystals with other crystals when they are in order. Now, because you can't remove them, once the crystals are stuck together, if you try and swap it or cut it or stack it or anything like that, they break and you lose everything. So when you're designing, obviously keep that in mind. Now, this is a design fail, but we've got the crystals set up in this way. Now, this is important to have crystallized shapes separated by basically throwaway parts so that you're able to use the swapper. And if that doesn't make sense to you yet, that's okay. It may become clear soon in the future. But so what we're doing here, we've just copied and pasted our latest design of swappers and put that in with these crystal inputs. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't currently work because as you can see here, it's swapping and combining two crystals on the bottom half and then immediately trying to swap again, and that just breaks the whole thing. And then you end up with a bit of a mess, unfortunately. So we've tried again with different rotations and things like that. And okay, cool. We didn't break any crystals, but that doesn't look like a full crystal shape to me. They've still got all these empty blank shapes in the mix. But it's an improvement, so that's good. So here we're just going back to working on a single lane, with swapping and just dumping again. So going back to that design process. And then, aha! We have at least one shape that we want. So we want red, blue, green, yellow. Fantastic, and it's all connected and together. And then for now, just dumping that blank shape. And last but not least, we're now trying to get that shape to occur twice, which we're able to do here. So on the outside lanes, we have the full-chorded crystal shapes all stuck together and in the same orientation. And really none of that is necessary per se with this specific design. We've just got the blanks that can be thrown away. Pardon me. The reason why that is here will become clear in just a moment. So with the crystals, you can use swappers. You do limit your output with this design, but it's, I believe, the most efficient way of using the swappers when you got crystals involved, as you still get 2 lanes of output, which is pretty good for crystals. Now, the very last test for this, if you want to use the same mechanism for shapes that are crystals and not, you want to take a look at the middle 2 lanes and design it accordingly. Now, I started with something like this, so it's already designed with the other 2 shapes in mind. But for demonstration purposes, I went back and filled in the colored shapes with gray shapes, because that's what you'll get with the crystals. So this is the same design here. I'm just demonstrating that it also swaps and orders the blank pieces, the top left and bottom right of each shape. So it takes that into consideration. and leaves us with the red, blue, green, and yellow orientation of the middle shapes as well. So these are all usable. Now, why is that important? Mainly for this reason, and give me 1 second. So the benefit of this design is it accounts for crystals. So it'll do crystals and it'll get them all right and nothing will break. But on top of that, if you're not using crystals, let's just put these to the side and put these in here, and then we'll speed up the speed so we don't need to wait for it to come through. And now we see that regardless of whether we use crystals or not, now we have 4 lanes of output if we're just using standard shapes. So that's the design that you're after. That's universal. So we can use that, or we can use it with crystals. And when you put the crystals in, it doesn't break. Whereas that first design, if you added crystals instead, the middle 2 broke. It was no good. We ended up with weird, wacky shapes. Those 2 would have been okay if we had normal shapes. Well, all 4 lanes would be normal. But when introducing crystals, we don't get any. And the same here. Not good enough. We could continue further on, but I decided to start again and end up with this design here. Well, that's about wraps it up for the quarter swappers. Basically the extent of my knowledge. I hope this video has been helpful and informative. All the best, guys, with creating your own designs with swappers and whatnot. And just take it easy. If you're unfamiliar, just take it one step at a time. Don't rush it, and don't worry about minimizing footprint in the beginning. Just focus on getting the desired shape that you want, and challenge yourself a bit. I know it can be daunting at the start, but I promise you guys it's worth it when you get the hang of swappers. Okay, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for watching, and until next time, bye for now. Have a blessed week.